welcome to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde. A quick announcement. We have a couple of great interview episodes to share with you this week and next. They're both fantastic. And then we're going to be mixing it up and having some fun for a month or so. If you haven't subscribed to the Fretboard Journal podcast feed yet, you're going to want to do so. You'll be able to see what all the fuss is about. And trust me when I say you are in for a treat. This week on the show, I'm talking to Jason Mays from the Working Class Music YouTube channel. He also just launched his own YouTube channel as well, Play Jason or at Jason T. Mays. I will include links in the show notes. Jason is a writer. He's done gear reviews for guitar.com. He's also going to start writing for us more here at the Journal. Now, Jason has a unique perspective, which is why I wanted to bring him on the show. He's one of the few people of color reviewing gear on YouTube. Let's start with that. He's also still a Guitar Center employee, and I wanted to hear all about what that's like in 2023 when we did this interview, or I guess 2024. He's just got a bunch of cool perspectives on a lot of things. I think you're going to love it. As you hopefully know, there is a magazine behind this podcast, and it's not just any magazine. It is a keepsake, beautiful, 128-page coffee table style book on guitars. It's called the Fretboard Journal, and we have a new issue out. A bunch of you subscribed over the holidays. Your copies are all en route to you now. The mailing house we used was a bit backlogged due to the holidays. Everybody's copy is in the mail stream now. If you want to join us, if you want to see what the fuss is about, go to fretboardjournal.com, click on that subscribe tab. You'll get the new issue 53 if you want, with Ben Harper and Joanna Sternberg and the wild guitar of Robbie Basho, and so much more. We specialize in beautiful photography and long-form interviews in journalism. There's nothing else like this in the print media space, and I hope you'll check it out. Go to fretboardjournal.com, click on the subscribe button. If you're on a budget, we also have a digital edition that mails to you pretty much within a second of when you order it. While you're at our website, go check out our other podcast that we put out. The Truth About Vintage Amps continues to kick ass. We're fielding all of your tube amp questions every other week. We've got the new Guitar for Introverts featuring Jamie Stillway. We've got Life on the Fretboard, Luthier on Luthier. There's so much to digest over there. It's kind of nuts. You could fill your whole week with podcasts. This installment of the Fretboard Journal podcast is brought to you by our friends at Seattle's own Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar. We just had Mike Ball on the show. Everyone should be following them if you haven't yet. If you need your guitar, acoustic or electric, or even an amp fix, they also have you covered. They have a full service repair shop. We are also brought to you by Stringjoy Strings. Use the discount code FRETBOARD when you check out over at stringjoy.com for 10% off of your first order. Check out their new mandolin strings. Those are a late breaking development. We've also got a discount over on Peghead Nation, where you can find a dozen or so of my favorite musicians giving online lessons across a wide variety of instruments. It's a truly cool place. You can get your first month free or $20 off of an annual subscription with the promo code FRETBOARD when you check out. Our friends at Isotope are continuing to give you a discount on all of that they do. You can use the discount code FRET10 to save 10% off of Isotope. We use it all the time over here. Again, today's interview is with the incredible writer and YouTuber Jason Mays. Please go check out his work. I want to thank you all, as always, for tuning in. If you love the podcast, leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. You can share this show with friends. It's a great way to spread the word about it. And we do have a Patreon for it if you really want to support me, which I really appreciate. And without further delay, here is my conversation with Jason Mays. Jason Mays, welcome to the Fretboard Journal podcast.
Hello there. Hey, everybody out there in the Fretboard Journal podcast land. I'm Jason.
Yeah, we've been talking for a year or two about various stories for the magazine, and you've done a little bit for our website, and I've gotten to know you a little bit, and I just thought it was high time we shared your story on the Fretboard Journal podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a few years.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful, because it's for me, it's always interesting because especially with the internet community, our community connecting everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, oh yeah, I've met this person. I've talked to this person, been in the same building, but I haven't met them in person.
That happens a lot. Yeah. That happens a lot. So Sometimes you send me pitches on stories and I don't even know the artists, which really makes me feel old. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. That's my only grievance for, Festivus here.
No, 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 that's fine. It's funny because there's one pitch I kind of want to send you, and I'm like, and in my head I'm trying to figure out like because their latest album doesn't have a lot of guitar in it, and
Okay.
I'm just like, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like,
I'll let you figure that out. But in the meantime, why don't we get a little bit of your story? So you're in Atlanta now, right?
mm-hmm. I'm
But
in Atlanta.
born and raised in Atlanta?
No, no, I grew up in Palm Beach County, and I was born in Miami of all places, but I grew up in Palm Beach County, and then I went to school, like college formative years in Tallahassee, Florida, and I would say my first bigger touring band ended up moving to Pensacola, Florida for, and then after that, there doing that whole thing, I met some other friends who were doing the whole touring thing, and then moved back to Tallahassee, then moved to California for this other band. And
What kind of
then
bands are these before we get too far into this?
a lot of them are just post-hardcore bands. Like I came up in the early aughts era, so there were a lot like Under Oath, um, like Day to Remember, like high-pitched vocalists, screaming over breakdowns. And I was always the one guy that's like, "Hey, man, this Bjork idea is pretty cool. Let's try to implement that." And they're like, "No, no, let's do a Day to Remember." And I'm like, "Okay, I mean, Thrice is cool too. Let's, do that." It's like, "No, no, no. They're not popular. They're not as popular right now. This other band's super popular." I'm like, "Okay." So that was always my role. And
And you were guitarist?
yep, mostly either guitar or keys.
Okay.
I predominantly play guitar now. For the last few years, I was pretty fortunate in the sense of being in a band with a keyboardist. So I was just like, I never had to be that guy, and I got to be more like Ed O'Brien. So
That's a reference I get. That
yeah,
last
yeah,
one.
yeah. I get to make the weird sounds and the pedals.
So, what kind of venues were these bands playing? I mean, Florida seems like an odd place for any band to be like, we're headquartered here. But is that
Mhm.
just the hotbed for that kind of music?
Kind of. I mean, we gave the world Creed and Limp Bizkit, so
It's true.
so we like each band was different. And I hate to say this, like the band that I was in, we were called Slaves, and we were playing pretty big venues. Like we would play Palladium in Boston, and everybody's playing the Masquerade at Atlanta. Don't care what size you are, you're
Okay.
playing the Masquerade. It just depends on where you're playing. Um, yeah, it like I've played everywhere from like house shows to I want to say it was like like theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't gotten quite the stadium level. Um, but yeah, it's been everywhere in between. So it's just like, we played VFW halls. I've played a couple of festivals, and they're always interesting. The first festival I played in that, I learned why in-ears are important. um, because when you're on a big stage, and in this band I was playing keys, and everybody, like, we were on a huge stage and everybody's like far apart. So we were off time because none of us can hear each other. And it's just like the delay, especially in the area we were playing. I was like, oh God, this is why everybody uses in-ears.
And obviously those you're not in those bands anymore because you're now
Mm.
sitting in not on a touring bus, but in a what looks like a nice living room in Atlanta.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the thing for me with that is, to say it bluntly, in that genre, there isn't a lot of music where you have a lot of, I'm not going to say that because that, for me, the type of music that I would like to make isn't very profitable
Mm-hmm.
within And after a while, like getting in my 30s, I was like, look, I don't want to come home broke from tour or like barely scraping by. It's, it's a lot. And so for me, I've just taken art and music and kind of compartmentalized it as this is for fun. This is my creative release. Don't get me wrong, there's as everything, especially doing it as a professional for so many years, I take that mindset and I implement it in everything that I do. So, releases have to be a certain way and everything. But at the end of the day, I'm not looking at it as like, oh, numbers, we have to hit these numbers. It's the band I'm in now, Young Mountain, we are just friends having fun. And the thing is, a lot of us in the past have come from those bigger bands in that scene. And, it was refreshing not to look at numbers for once and all these other things and write music that we care about. Not saying we didn't care about the other music, but like where, hey, we're not trying to be the biggest band in the world. We're not trying to, release the catchiest song ever. We're just doing this because it's a good mental release for us and it helps us. So for me, that's where I'm at now with music. Like on the side, I've started like little solo project of sorts. Like really, it was just me getting my film scoring tendencies out and writing more so electronic based music because I've always had a thing for that. If you didn't catch it by the Bjork reference,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at now with music. It's just I like creating and I like my life right now creatively is awesome. I get to do whatever I want and I can create without the mindset of like, do I have to please anyone else outside of myself?
Mm-hmm. Were you as much of a gearhead when you were in those touring bands as you are now? I mean, now you're like reviewing gear for guitar.com and all these other places. Or did that all happen after you were like, I'm off the road, I get to nerd out?
A little bit of both. Like I always knew about gear. Pedals, I wasn't as worldly. I was more so into guitar and amps. And then pedals came afterwards, especially once I started playing guitar more. And trying to figure out different things and trying to emulate certain sounds. But yeah, guitars, I would say certain brands, I was always like, I feel like the old man yelling at the cloud, being like, okay, in the late aughts, you would definitely see me with a Jazzmaster. Like, that was the guitar I found that was my thing. And beforehand, like, I tried PRS and I even tried a Gibson and it didn't click like that. And then when I found the Jazzmaster, I was like, okay, I learned everything about it. And I was like, okay, so this is why I like this guitar. And then like with amps, it was like at that time, everybody was playing Orange in our scene. And, I loved Orange, but I was like, man, why does this sound like this? And then I figured out, oh, it's because this circuit is built this way with this tube complement. So it's going to sound like this. And then I was like, well, what's the opposite of that? And then, Fender amps and everything.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, so this is, and just started mixing and matching. And then once I started working in music retail and having that knowledge and then learning more about different pedals, that's where it's just like, oh, I really love this stuff. And and my knowledge for it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah. So you've already referenced a bunch of artists that aren't in the typical Fretboard Journal wheelhouse. And I think you're a little younger than I am. So what was the gateway thing? What were the bands when you were growing up that even steered you to that Jazzmaster at the beginning?
Honestly, like the first that I could ever recall of a Jazzmaster was the Smashing Pumpkins. And it was the video for Zero. And I remember James Eha playing that white Jazzmaster. And I always thought James Eha was just like the coolest guitarist ever. Because it was like, oh, he's super cool. He's up there doing his thing. And I just remember being like, what is that guitar? And I was like, because aesthetically, they're all in black and he has this white instrument. And I don't think that was intentional, but it was just something that caught my eye. And then it went by for a few years. And then Mike Einzinger from Incubus, he made the switch from PRS to Fender. And I was just like, holy crap. And I know a lot of the Incubus guitar nerd fanboys, they didn't appreciate that switch, especially on their album A Crow Left and a Murder. They thought tonally it wasn't the greatest.
Okay.
I, however, was in love with it because I was just like, holy crap, this is like, it made him sound different than what he was previously doing in terms of tone. And like those two were the big pieces. Of course, Radiohead, of course, seeing Tom York with a jazz master, that's kind of a given. But those pretty much steered me to that guitar. And it was just like one of those things of where when I finally played one after trying so many other guitars, and then it kind of dawned on me, it's like, okay, this is why so many people play this.
Mm-hmm. Do you even remember? I mean, I'm so old compared to you. Do you even remember where you first saw that Smashing Pumpkins video? Was that like on YouTube, or was that?
No, that was actually on MTV.
It was? Okay. Okay.
That was on MTV. I was a little kid, and I just like that. That's the thing about it. Like that's kind of cool about it is like, as a kid, the two artists that like music videos like were the most creative that I can recall was Michael Jackson and the Smashing Pumpkins, and that was in the 90s. And it's just like they left an impression. Like oh man, these videos look cool.
Yes, they were, and still are.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Atlanta? Was just like home base because you were done with the band, right? You'd go anywhere.
No, actually, the band with the most notoriety that I was a part of, I quit / got kicked out mid-tour, and I was just like, well, I'm going to stay in Atlanta. I had some friends here, and for the longest we'd talked about playing music together and me joining their band, and this just kind of seemed ideal. And when that happened, I was like, all right, this is going to be like my last serious hurrah at like being in a big touring band. And at that time, they had just had issues with their label. And so it kind of was just a new start for everybody. And so for me, I was like, all right, this is going to be my last hurrah. I definitely want to, tour and, keep doing that. And that didn't really pan out. And I was just like, all right. So I was in this weird, super dark, depressive phase. And it was just like, I remember saying to myself, I think I need a break. But after being creative for so long and being a part of being a part of that life, even when I voiced I needed a break, people are like, are you sure? Like, that's all you've done. And I'm like, I guess you're right, and keep going. And then it's just like, after that, that's when I kind of learned, I was like, you know what, I'm kind of done, like as far as the touring and all of that. And it's just like, and the joke has become like, yeah, if a big enough band comes along and like, they offer us a really good guarantee every night, yeah, I'll gladly do it. It's like, but that's not happening.
So which was it? Did you get thrown out or did you quit?
Both. It was both.
At the same time?
Yes. Literally okay, so this is what happened. I knew they had been talking behind the scenes about me being a bassist, because I admittedly wasn't the best bassist for that type of music. And I just thought it was just like maybe root notes or everything. And I was like, and they were like, no. And my initial impression was that I came into the band because the band members themselves, most of them, not all of them, because one of them I'm still really good friends with, are pretty notable in that scene for being really bad people. And so, and then after living with them for some time and seeing all of that, like, I was just like, yeah, I can't do this. I was like, I remember going with some friends to get dinner, and they're like, and we were talking, I'm like, yo, I am pretty much done. Like, I am mentally like, and then I got a phone call from the band and they were like, hey, we have to talk. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they're like, yeah, it just isn't working, yada, 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 musically, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, oh, thank God. In my head, I was like, oh, thank God, just play this and be done with it. And it was like, just move on to the thing that you've always wanted to do. And so it worked out because in my head, I was just like, honestly, I was waiting until Florida because Florida was the next date. And I was just like, but I also didn't want to go back to Florida. I always look at life as like continually moving forward. So for me, going back to Florida, which I had done, I went back from Pensacola to Tallahassee before, and that's not as big. But for me, I was like, well, if I want to keep going forward with creativity, I just had the innate feeling like it's here with them, at this moment. And then it wouldn't be in Florida.
Got it. So you mentioned you work at Guitar Center. When did that was that like the first day job after this whole ordeal?
Oh, that was the first day job. Yes. Actually, one of the many benefits of Guitar Center is their tour leave. And they, depending on, location and for the most part, they can be pretty accommodating for touring musicians. So it was nice to be able to like go, like I literally was between three guitar centers during all that time, like one in Florida, the other one in California, and then the one in the Atlanta area that I work at now. And it was just pretty cool. Just be like, hey, here's my metrics. Do you want me? And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, with the Atlanta location, it was kind of the same deal. It was like, hey, I've worked, I remember, I don't like, I just showed them my metrics really. Cause I was
what are these metrics? I didn't even know this existed.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know how much I can say on, but basically, like any other sales job, there are metrics to certain things. And mine just happened to be really good.
Okay. You're a good salesperson.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more importantly, I actually knew about gear, but not even just guitar gear, but like pro audio gear. So it was, I was well versed, so I can tell people about recording and PA stuff, and I can also sell guitars. So, yeah, so that always worked in my favor.
So how long have you been at Guitar Center in total?
Since 2010, so going on 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're probably one of the, if not the only gear journalist who's actually on the front line seeing how actual working musicians buy gear and not, pie in the sky boutique daydreaming.
Yeah, no, and honestly, I think that gives me an advantage because it's like, I'm glad you said that because it's like one of the things I like to do in terms of gear, especially for the newer YouTube channel I started, is I like to interact with people and see what's going on, like what gear they'd be interested in seeing that they know I like and that they like, or, vice versa. Like we all know I love jazz masters. So it's just like, all right, which jazz master would you like to see? And which jazz master are you currently playing? And then, because one of the things that, as a journalist and a gear reviewer on YouTube, that I think there's a disconnect between a lot of people and their audience, because it's just like, yeah, like I can review a two rock, but how many people are going to play it or how many people are playing it? And it's just like, admittedly, I'm guilty on the new channel of playing high-end gear, but this is just me like, oh, I've always wanted to try this. I wanted to try this, but I always try to talk to people, and especially at work, like, because they know I love talking gear, and we can get really nerdy with like if I'm recognized, I get really nerdy with like reverb pedals and such, and we'll talk different companies and whatnot, and then I'll find out what they're using it for. And that helps inform my view of like what this pedal could be for, because I love shoegaze, I love all this other stuff, but this other person might not like be into it, and they're using it in a different way. And this person, like the overlap, they might be interested in this pedal that I wasn't interested in.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool.
So you got two YouTube channels now, Working Class Music with Tia. When did that one start?
That one started 2 or 3 years ago. We started it towards the end of the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to say 2 going on 3 years.
And what was the original idea behind that?
The idea behind that was Tia and I, we'd known each other for a while. And I, we talked about like starting a YouTube channel together, but mainly because there weren't a lot of people like us, like, people of color at the time doing that. And and the ones that weren't necessarily in the guitar community.
Mm.
And for me, and well, for both of us, we just wanted to see more people like us doing it. Like, that was the main reason why we started it, and just to have fun because, like, I think one of the things that we intentionally go into our videos doing is like, hey, let's have fun and let's capture that on camera rather than being like, here's this guitar and here's this scale. And the fact that like we're both very different players. I've always said Tia is like, she is way beyond me in terms of guitar. Like, she can play, and I'm just more like, okay, here's these cool chords, and like, here's this ambient, weird sound. So it was more so combining all the things that we wanted to see on other YouTube channels, mainly, but giving people of color and other marginalized groups of people a place where they felt welcome on YouTube. Like, I hope that doesn't sound egotistical or anything like that, but it was really, that's really the continued main goal for why we created the channel and why we do it.
Yeah. You've made it sound brief a little minute ago like there are more people of color now on YouTube doing.
Oh yeah.
There are. Okay.
Yeah, there are, like, and it's funny because they're like freaking huge. And I'm just like, and I'm not saying it's because of us, obviously not, because they're a
Yeah.
whole different thing, but it's just like, it's refreshing to see that growth, and not only people of color but women and
Yeah.
just different genders like within that community come up in like the time that we started to where we are now. And it's kind of cool because the change that we wanted to see, we're seeing it. And for
Yeah.
me, it's just like that means a lot because even like well, I can't, like, even on some bigger YouTube channels in terms of music, it's just like, hey, you're using the Walrus Audio R1 and you're playing blues licks when this is an ambient reverb pedal.
Sure.
Like, it was things like that. It's like, okay, how does this do? This pedal was designed for this will destroy you, or type music. How can we do that? And so for me, it's kind of cool seeing that.
Yeah, and YouTube is such a crazy platform. Usually the cranks and the trolls and the bad commenters steal the thunder. But I'm guessing you've gotten amazing letters from people who have been inspired to see people of color like playing the kind of music that they're playing, probably from around the world.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the best part of doing this, because we live in our own bubble. So we are, while we see the comments, it doesn't really hit us until like there's a personal comment where the person took the time and they are like, they go in, like, it's not surface level, like they really, really appreciate it. And I'll get messages on my Instagram very similar to those. And that's when it hits me. And I'll always try to screenshot those, because I do believe in showcasing positivity, not like showcasing my own ego, but showcasing positivity. Because as much as I do like to make fun of the negative comments, I also like to highlight the positive ones, because they reinforce the reason that, hey, this is doing something.
Yeah. You guys, the channel has grown. I encourage everyone hearing this to go check it out and subscribe. At this point, like, how big is the operation? I mean, I think everybody thinks that they could be on YouTube, but then when you actually get down, as great as technology is, like, it's still a crap ton of gear and editing.
Oh
And
yeah.
to do it right, which you guys are, like what does the operation look like now? How many videos do you put out? How much help do you have? I want to hear all those little
Oh
details.
God. Oh, so we still try to keep it to one video a week.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll do two, maybe three, but one video a week, so that way we don't overwork ourselves. But the operation has gotten insane. Even and again, we're not the biggest channel
Sure.
ever. We're not Rhett Shaw level or like Rick Beato of that
Yeah.
that stature. But like there's four of us. We have myself and Tia, which are the hosts, and then there's Nelson, who is the editor, and Xander, who runs sound, and basically the rig behind that our backdrop is his rig. So
Okay.
And it started with all four of us, but now it's like, hey, we, I'll have companies reach out to us or even me, and we'll get the I hate to say product, but it is product. We'll get the product, and we still run by the rule of like, if we don't like it, we won't do it. But there's a ton of editing. Nelson is always editing. And then sometimes we overwork ourselves to the point where we'll have too much gear to review. And, which some people are like, oh, that's not a problem. And I was like, it is when you're working with these companies and, there's deadlines. And, we don't see that much money, but it's like the process of just like getting in front of the camera and saying our thoughts have changed more so to be scripted and in line with like, hey, this product description, because you don't want to be the person on YouTube that screws up and everybody sees that and they're like, oh, that person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Sure.
So it's definitely gotten more into a groove, and there are certain things like now a lot of my time, like even on my lunch break at work, like I'm typically figuring out a pedal or playing a guitar for something that we're going to review. So that way, I can go in knowing what we're doing, so to speak, because even in the early videos, and I feel bad, like you can tell that I did not know. and 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 so there's a lot of work. Just even setting up before we film is like an hour of like pre-pro. Like we get there, we have to sound check everything, which we film in our basement. We sound check everything, we go over things and then we just do it. And there's a million takes. It's not like one long form video. And then not only that, it's just like between being in talks with different brands and everything else, it's grown into quite the operation. And, my role in all of that is I've become more so the gear acquisition person and the person who scripts things. And typically I'm on social media, trying to network and do all of that. So that's become more of my role in things. And yeah, it's more active because the downside of it is what people don't realize with YouTube is there is an algorithm, which we do realize that, but and it is a numbers game. So, you have to pay attention to that. And it's like I try to pay attention for the channel and what our audience likes, because, if not only what they like, but we do try to experiment as well, and just to see what sticks. And I know some things have, like we know our tried and true. So we know what we can do, and it's like, oh yeah, this will do a couple thousand views, we'll be fine. But at the same time, I think, with the algorithm in mind, it's just like, it's this weird game that YouTube is. It's like you don't want to do one video that does really well and then the next video doesn't, and then you're wondering how the next video is going to do because it's not as visible because it's not doing these numbers.
Did you all learn this from trial and error, or did you learn it from web resources or Reddit threads or books or everything?
All of the above, trial and error mainly, and definitely a lot of resources. Like for me, it came in handy from like the music background, from like the whole touring bands and stuff, because it's like, okay, having a publicist and having all those people, there were meetings, and I would do more listening on how they approach marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, so I took that mindset and I ran with it in terms of YouTube. And then I figured out a bunch of other things from other content creators. And yeah, it's been a lot of trial and error on, like, in terms of us trying something out and be like, hey, let's try this out. And, seeing how people will react to it. And, oftentimes, whether they react positively or negatively to, which no one's nearly, well, but if there's a lot of engagement to it, or if there isn't, we'll still try it. Like, if we liked it, we'll still do it. Like, and it's just one of those things of, because we try to remind ourselves that, hey, while this is seeing success, the core of it is us doing what we like. And, and the core of it is, quote unquote, friendship, and I say quote unquote, because that's like the, the meme worthy thing, but it is true. Like, those are the two things that we do this for. So we have to take into account the business side of it, and the business is growing. And there are people that, have hit us up about doing stuff. And it's nice to finally get paid somewhat from that.
Yeah, I was
So,
going to ask. I'm like such an old school geezer journalist. Like, do the brands always pay you for these videos? To some degree? No. Okay.
No. It depends on the brand. There are a few brands that I understand due to their size, they can't. And personally, I'm willing to work with them. I understand that. And there are other brands that they're just like, dudes, you guys need to raise your prices. You're worth way more than this. And I'm just like, okay, like, that's that's pretty huge accomplishment. And it's just like, there are a ton of other brands that they're in between. Like, they'll try to work out something, but it's pretty cool. They do pay us, and like, and we still have a pretty good they pay us with having, and well, they pay us and we have a good relationship with them. So it's the best of both worlds.
Do you make more money off of like the YouTube AdWords stuff, or from the manufacturers? Or is it kind of down the middle?
It's probably right down in the middle, because I would say like the ad money is pretty decent for the size that we're at. But it's always nice to have like a manufacturer come along and be like, hey, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to do a video on this.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things I will say about that being right in the middle is, like, again, that's where, we have to appease numbers type things. And because it's just like, well, if we want a bigger ad revenue, we have to do more numbers.
Mm-hmm. What's the most popular video you've done?
The most popular video would be our Jaguar, or the Squire Contemporary Jaguar, or the Fender Ventera 1 Jazzmaster. Both of them are north of, no, actually, I think it might be the Squire Baritone Telecaster. I know all three of those are north of 20,000.
Okay.
I don't know the exact numbers on them, but I know they're north of that. And Squires tend to be pretty popular.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, you said you'd go through multiple takes. You do these in a day. You got a team of 4. Like, this has to be like, I mean, maybe you're all making decent money and I'm just clueless, but like, it's got to be hard.
Oh no, it is. We're not making that. We're not making decent money. Like, like, it's funny because other content creators told us, they're like, man, if you guys were just like one person, you would be making bank. And I'm like, yeah, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
But no, we don't make a lot of money from this. It just so happens to be, we're gear nerds, and 3/4 of us are gear nerds. And so, the gear that we get that we can keep, is kind of a cool, like, hey, this is a form of payment. Like, we'll take.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we could talk about mental health later on in this podcast if you want, but I think for your sanity's sake, it's good to have a team and not do what a lot of us do and try to like do everything and be a one-man band. That's
Oh yeah,
hard.
yeah. No, it's I already do that somewhat on the music end of things, like with the band I'm in, and that is already like a lot. So I was like imagining doing that with the show. Like I I know there's a bunch of content creators that experience burnout and they've
Yeah.
experienced it. And I'm just like, well, I understand it because like they do everything. Like they
Mhm.
do everything. And I'm just like, man, I'm over here just like I only step in front of the camera and like, come up with a script, sometimes. And it's just like, but they're editing, they're doing all their sound demos. They're not only also editing the video, they're editing the music. They're editing like everything that you see. They're setting up lighting. They're coming up with their own scripts. They're doing all the behind the scenes research. Like it's a lot. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And then it's just like I said, I realize why they experience burnout because like I'm only doing like a quarter of what one person is doing for their channel.
Sure. Well, perfect segue. Given all that, why'd you decide to start your own YouTube channel? Break
Oh,
out, do a solo thing.
mainly because being a group of four, I didn't want it. I didn't personally. I wanted everybody in our group to be heard, and I
Yeah.
didn't want it to feel like one, like myself. I'll be transparent. I didn't want it to feel like working class music was just Jason and friends, and I
Yep.
wanted everybody to have a voice and be heard. And then not only that, there are a lot of vendors that will hit me up personally, and they'll ask me to do stuff, and you know not that it doesn't fall in line with what we're doing, but for me, it was just like, all right, well, I can do, if I have an idea, I don't have to run it by everybody else. I can just try it my way and not really worry about that. And I've always, no matter what I've done, I've always had an outlet, whether it be music or even in YouTube, like where I have something to myself where I can have uh, as much control as I would like.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And
not only second form of revenue if I get monetized.
so are you doing it all yourself?
No, it's just me and the editor.
Okay.
It's just both of us right now, and like I kind of want to keep it that way because the ideal behind this channel more so was to do like as bad as this sounds, and I'm giving away the secret. I
Okay.
kind of want to do shorter gear reviews because of the way the TikTok generation is, and I'm not even on TikTok. Like everybody does, like there are gear reviewers who do really long videos and they're super successful, but there isn't the opposite of like, oh,
Oh,
here's like a 5-minute video. What can we do in that time frame, and can that be successful in itself? So that I felt like that was one idea to do this solo channel was to do it as like short form gear reviews where it isn't like 1 minute and then it's that's it, but to do something different that we normally can't do on the channel.
mm-hmm. So are you gonna have to learn TikTok and get on it now?
Oh God, probably. I've fought I have fought hard against getting on TikTok because it's like I'm a millennial and I still just keep it Facebook and Instagram. That's it. That's the
You're
only
an
thing.
old soul millennial.
Yeah, it's an old like that's the only things that I have, and it's just like I'm like, oh God, everybody's like, yeah, you guys gonna have to get on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, I've been fearing that. And it's just like I'm over here just like, oh, well, I'm doing good on the Instagram reels. And they're like, oh, you'd be doing even better on TikTok.
Yeah. It's a whole world. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a scary world. It's just like, and again, it's just like adding that already onto my workload. I'm just like, that's what I'm trading the most.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, do you know? I mean, you probably would more than I would. Like, are there guitar content people on TikTok making noticeable revenue from TikTok?
um surprisingly, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I don't know
know.
either.
Yeah, I don't I know last year's NAMM, I went viral on TikTok for a video from 60 Cycle Hum. And I was just like, I was in the video and I was just looking at this guitar that was changing. And
Oh yeah.
I was just like, oh yeah. And apparently that went viral and I didn't even know it. And I was just like, oh, but I don't think Ryan made money off of it.
No. Yeah, I mean that's a whole nother world. I won't even attempt to understand it.
Yeah, I've kind of just been like, I have my nieces, they can tell me about it.
Yeah, that's exactly how to do it. Is have someone trusted who's a little younger, maybe, or into it at least.
They get it, and I will admit that they understand it better than I do.
Yeah, yeah. So what does your music output look like right now? What are you working on?
Right now, actually, it's funny you say that. Funny, that's a good segue because right now the band has kind of reconvened and we're working on a ton of new music right now. Last night I just got done demoing a rough draft for this single that we want to release. And then we're also working on our follow-up EP. And we recently reconvened because like the first song off of the EP, we all wrote as a band.
Mhm.
And I usually am very apprehensive about that because it's like I don't want to sit there just standing there and everybody's just going a million miles a second. We're just like looking at each other and it's just a bunch of noise. And so I tend to write by myself. But for this record, it's turning into a very collaborative experience. So we've really been diving into that, and I it just hit at a really good time. And now I'm doing that. And another bit of music that I'm doing, a new friend and I, Bailey Christine, she does a lot of wonderful artwork. She asked me to write some music for her, like for some visual stuff, and I'm just like, yes, I'm all over that.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, as far as other music, like I've been sitting on a second solo EP. I just
Okay.
want someone to sing on it. And it was just like, I've just been lazy about it. And a part of me is like, well, you got to release something at least on Valentine's Day, at least a cover. That's the
Mhm.
goal I gave myself. So there's a lot going on in the music front, and it's all been very good. Like I think hopefully soon we're going to hear some new music because we've had a couple offers to do things, and we haven't taken it because it's like, hey, we've for the last 2 years we've been playing the same songs. It's like
Mhm.
it's not that we haven't written new material. It's just being the nature of the band where it's like, oh yeah, it's I don't want to say not serious. We're very relaxed. And it was just like, okay, hey, you guys are tired of playing the same songs. I'm tired. They're tired of singing the same songs. Let's write some new music. So our goal is we're not playing anything until we at least have 3 new songs to show for it.
What's the name of this band?
Young Mountain. Young
Young Mountain.
Mountain.
Okay. Here's a question. You get all this gear. You see way more gear than I see here because I don't do demo videos. You review it, you write a script, you review it, you post it on YouTube. Is there a piece of gear that when you had to review it on YouTube and do the spiel, you liked it, enough to talk about it and review it, but then after you did it, it inspired you and you ended up like gravitating into it way more than you thought you would when you first unboxed it?
Oh yeah. There's quite a few pieces of gear like that. Oh man, no, I would say the first one that instantly comes to mind because it's the most recent is the Wars Audio Slower. Um, I got that. That was a cool story because
Explain what that is for the 75% of my listeners who are like, "What's that? Am I gonna have to
it's
Google
a
it?"
yes, it's a very ambient reverb.
Okay.
Um, and last NAMM, I ran into Tyler and like they were telling me about it before it was released. And he was like, "Dude, you have to do a demo on it." And I was like, "Well, I love the its predecessor, the Slow." So I was like, "Of course." And then when I did the video on it, I was like, "Oh, I really, really like this." I've been playing it, and then afterwards, I've been doing a lot of demos with that reverb,
Hmm.
and I've just been like, "Oh snap!" Like as far as filling up space and just how it sounds so lush. Like it has become instrumental. And it's funny because I tagged them in a post this morning about a demo that I was working on. And like they replied, and I'm like, yeah, you guys don't know, but this is like literally the reverb sound of these demos. Like it's probably gonna be the reverb sound of this next record. Other than that, some to kind of keep in line, there's the Scythe OH10 that I got that I knew I was going to love, but I didn't realize how much I was going to love because I've been writing a lot of the demos with that guitar in mind. And and there's one other thing I just can't speak about it because it hasn't been released, but I've been pleasantly surprised by it, and I use that as well. And other than that, I'm never, you know what? Two other pedals, and I'll tell you what they do. The first one is the Montreal Assembly Count to Five, and that's a granular looper slash sampler. It chops up your playing, and you can come up with some very interesting loops. I use that a lot to create, especially in the lo-fi stuff. That has become crucial in creating samples. Like even if I'm at work and I have my board with me and on my lunch break, that's always there to create samples to write over. And then the other one would be, well, no, two other ones. I swear, just two other ones.
Nah.
The other one is the Ama by AC Noises. AC Noises. It's another reverb pedal, but it has a bit crusher built into it. So it has a low resolution type Nintendo-ish sound to it. And for more ambient passages and both the lo-fi solo stuff and the ambient Young Mountain full band stuff, it works insanely well. And I knew I was going to like it because I saw Emily Hopkins demo it. And then I got it and I was like, oh yeah, this is it. And then I would say the last one would be the Chase Bliss Mood, or the Mood Mark II. Either or is interchangeable, but it has a micro sampler in it, and I use that as well. And I didn't realize how handy it would become, especially in a live situation, because it's always listening. So I can turn it on, and most of the time, like it'll create this really cool, unique ambient passage of what I'm playing, and it's chopped up. And then like the Count to Five, what I'll do is I can often record that and create samples from that. So those are the ones that instantly come to mind as far as like, I got it and I'm like, I know what this is going to be. And then I use it. I'm like, holy crap, I need this. Like, holy crap, this is awesome. And it's become instrumental in my creative process.
I just love that you're so into guitars that you're bringing your pedal board to work at Guitar Center to play at lunch.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like that's what I do. Everybody's just like, oh, you're supposed to go and get something to eat. And I'm like, nah, I got to figure this out. Like, and it's just like, since it's like, I am literally, unless I'm asleep, or playing video games, my life is literally music in one way or another. So
what is your role at Guitar Center? Do they move you around department to department, or are you like, this is my station?
I'm more like, this is my station.
Okay.
I'm pretty much just a sales associate. I've tried other roles and they weren't for me. I didn't enjoy them as much. I get the most joy out of like helping people with music, like especially people getting into guitar, like, and helping guide them, because I'll just ask them very basic questions and then usually I can figure out what they would gravitate towards, and 9 times out of 10 they do. And just seeing the joy that someone who is first getting into music, first getting their first guitar or first keyboard, just seeing that joy, like, as cliche as it sounds, it's worth that job to me, because it's like you don't, as musicians, you know, we've kind of gotten like, oh, we're jaded. We don't see that joy as much. But for someone just getting into music and seeing how happy this piece of gear makes them, and seeing that they love it and they picked it out themselves, that is the reason why I will always continue being a sales associate at Guitar Center for my time there.
Yeah, I mean, what Guitar Centers run the full gamut? Like, is this a bustling one? Is this like one that rock stars come through, or is this more of like in a suburban strip mall, or what kind of center is it?
Um, this is a very affluent one.
Okay,
We do get a lot of celebrities. We had Keith Sweat. We had what was the Leonard Skinner last one who recently passed away.
the guitarist,
Yeah.
Gary Rossington.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He's come in. Have T-Pain. T-Pain's a regular at our location.
Okay,
Um, just, we have a lot of high-end celebrities, and it's only because of the area that it's in. It's one of the more affluent suburbs of Georgia. So, you have people like Usher and like Justin Bieber who are down the street from that location. And it's not too out of the norm to have somebody come in and they're like with a list of things. And then once you start talking, they're like, oh yeah, I'm working on this person's record. And it's like, oh, okay. It's just like one of my regulars, he's little he's working on a Demi Lovato record, I believe. And it's just like I'm just like, oh, like didn't know that. Like, and then you still get other people from like the guitar world that'll come in and they're just like, you're like, oh, I didn't know that was you. And one of my biggest moments was when Scott and his brother from Frightened Rabbits came into our Guitar Center. And at the time, I was I would say I was a casual fan. I wasn't hugely into them. The record that they had released, I loved at that
yeah,
time. And I was like, oh yeah, what band are you in? And they're like, oh yeah, we're in a band called Frightened Rabbits. And I was just like, I was like, you've got to be joking. And they're like, oh yeah, just if you want to come and come to our show and whatnot. And at the time, I was just like, I made plans with my girlfriend. That girlfriend was like, she is not going to let me go. And like, but like, it's little fanboy moments like that'll happen. And we're not the typical Guitar Center.
okay. Does it ever maybe I don't want you to get fired or anything, but like does the store ever close down for like the Uber, T-Pain, Justin Timberlake celebs, or is it like the DMV where it's like everyone's equal at Guitar Center?
Oh,
You gotta
everyone's
shop
equal.
with the rest of us.
Everyone's equal. Like,
Okay.
I would say it was funny because depending, I know right now, Migos is super popular in the hip hop world. And Quavo came in and like I was talking to him on the phone and it was just like it's funny because like everybody was freaking out that he was there. And it was just like, and I'm just sitting over here like, oh yeah, I'm just doing my job. But I'm like, after he left, I turned to my manager. I was like, we should have probably at least like shut the store down. It was
Yeah.
like, hey, come between this. You come early in the morning.
Sure. I mean, you're making all these videos for your channel. I know Guitar Center makes a crap ton of content. Have they ever reached out to you to represent the company that you work for?
No, no, they have not, and that's been the running joke. Like, one of my managers was just like, "Well, you should probably reach out to them." I'm like, "Nah." I was like, I would rather. I was like, if they reached out to me, it's a whole different story because I was like, then that means there's no nice way to say this. That means they see value in what I'm doing and they're interested in partnering.
Yeah.
And I kind of view it like being in a band and it's like you're reaching out to labels, you're not going to get the best deal. But if they reach out to you,
Mhm.
then they see something in you, and in turn, you'll be more than likely to get a better deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Guitar Center's lost. They got to get on this
I know.
before you're too big.
I like I I think because I would say I think they could definitely get up to date with social media. that's I'll leave it at that. I was like, yeah, I don't I think that's partially why.
In the decade plus you've been working there, you know, like we said, you're one of the few people of color, or were one of the few people of color in the guitar, at least YouTube space, and certainly music journalist space. I can say that with confidence. Like, have you seen the demographic of guitar consumers change for better or worse over the last 10 years in terms of diversity, age, non-binary, anything? Like, has anything changed?
Yes. Again, I know my example is just limited to myself, but I have seen an uptick of people of color picking up guitar. Because when I first started, it was just like, oh yeah, I hate, it would be like, oh, the stereotype, like, oh, they're going to be a DJ, and I'm like, that annoyed me to no end. So at this location, seeing an uptick of people of all genders and colors pick up guitar, like especially around the time of the pandemic and after, that meant a lot to me, because it was just like people are really wanting to learn this, and it wasn't just more so a trend. And there has been a change in that, and it's just like I've seen less and less people become DJs, and more people gravitate towards guitar or piano, mainly guitar. And some of their influences, especially like people of color, like there are a couple customers that I've helped, and I'm just, and I will ask them because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, who's your favorite artist? Or so and so, and a surprising amount. I expect to hear Taylor Swift, but a surprising amount is Willow Smith.
Oh.
And I've just been like, whoa. I was like, okay, cool. Like, and don't know me wrong, I do get Taylor Swift in there, but it's just more and more you're starting to see people list off guitarists who I think the older generation are kind of writing off, but the young people are really, really, really inspired by. Like Polyphia is another example. Like that's the new, like I forget the name of the song, but that riff is the new Sweet Child of Mine. Like you'll hear like, you'll hear a Gen Z person playing that riff as much as you'll hear like an older person playing Sweet Child of Mine, like, or it's
Stairway to Heaven. That was going to be my next question, is what's the most played riff?
I would say right now it is probably, I forget the name, probably, is it GOAT? I don't remember, but probably that Polyphia riff. I hear that the most.
Yeah. Interesting. Wild. Are you the kind of person? I'm not. Are you the kind of person who can watch yourself on playback on video and just be like, hey, I'm cool? Because I cringe when I see myself on video. I'm self-conscious. It's one of the reasons I do these audio only podcasts. But are you your harshest critic, or are you hey, I kicked ass there?
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. Like I will watch some of my own videos, and the running joke that I've made is like, oh, thank God I have Tia to fall back on. So it's like, because I was like, she's awesome and she's playing well and she's like carrying everything, like with the solos and stuff, and I'm just like ding ding ding, and it's just like oh God, I'm like, but admittedly it isn't helped. That mindset isn't helped because a few vendors that I have done stuff with, they'd post my videos and I'd see some of the meaner comments and I'm like, oh God, I suck. I should stop. But I watch it only more so in the context of learning what I could do better, how close I got to a certain riff, and more so like if, to let my editor know, hey, we might have to reshoot this.
Do you read all the comments?
I read a lot of them. I try to respond to them. I try to respond to everybody on social media, whether it's good or bad, only because, that's probably why my mental health is the way that it is. But
yeah, jeez.
But yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, I don't ever want to be a part of something that's too cool to talk to people. And it's just like, I like engaging with people because that's how I learn. And, even the meaner comments, like, I mean, admittedly, I'm kind of a troll on the meaner comments. I will be honest about that.
Okay.
But it's one of those things where I don't want to be one of those YouTubers or journalists or musicians where you feel like you can't have a conversation with them, and if you do, they're not paying attention.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, people can have a conversation with me, but they actually have to like call me or email me. I wouldn't engage on YouTube or Instagram necessarily, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the comments too are just like questions, and one of the things that annoy me about like other YouTubers is like they won't respond to those questions, and
sure.
it's just like I'm like, hey, engage with you because that means a lot to people watching, and for me, it's like even the negative comments, I'm just like I'm used to people having my back on that, so it's just like I mean I some of the negative comments now I've just kind of brushed off. Most of them I've brushed off, mainly because they don't really have to do with my playing. It's more so my skin color or a political position that I've taken. Like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, you like I have the Black Lives Matter shirt in the Black Sabbath font. And when
Yeah.
I first wore that, I got a ton of comments, hate comments about that. And they're like, oh, do you really know what it means? And yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, about the organization, and I'm just like, dude, I'm just playing guitar. Like, I'm just trying. I was like, you're questioning a black person about whether they know the meaning of this.
Yeah.
That's really bold. And two, it's just like, could we just go back to the music? Like, I just want people, and again, it boiled back down to, I want people like myself to be seen and heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I think that I would definitely say I'm pretty sure I wore that shirt on the Seymour Duncan video I did, and they clipped it and put it on their Insta, and the comments were just, oh man, yeah, that was they were brutal. Well, I don't want to say they were brutal because they were what I expected from people who were those type of people. And the positive comments were awesome, and I mean, I read them, and I'm not going to be one of those guys like, oh, I don't read them because like I said, I want to engage with people, and in every facet that I do, I try to engage with people. But I will say, like, yeah, some of the negative comments are, oh man, like they're rough.
Yeah. I mean, I think most musicians we're pretty fragile artist types. So you got to watch out for your mental health there with
Yeah.
those comments.
Which is funny. Which is funny because it's just like, in terms of music, like I don't care if someone tells me I suck. I'm like, look, I've never claimed to be a shredder. So if you say I suck, and it's just like, oh, because you don't play 1,000,000,000 miles an hour, okay, cool. Like I can agree with that, but it's like it's funny. Like if people insult my playing, I don't take it offensively because it's like I'm not trying to do something I'm not. Like it's your opinion, and it's just like I've like even with Young Mountain, like if I hear anyone like if anyone has criticized our music and have been vocal about it, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, we're all pretty talented, and this was our end goal, and we accomplished it for ourselves. If you like it, that's a plus. If you don't, tough luck.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's a bunch of other bands to go and listen to.
Yeah. I mean it's easier to just be like, oh, well, let's hear your album versus for some strange reason, everyone thinks that they could be or should be a guitar reviewer on YouTube when it's a skill.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the thing that people, especially in the comment section, they don't get that it's just like, it's not as easy to jump on camera and just play guitar. And one of the like unsung secrets to working class music is the dichotomy between Tia and myself.
Yeah.
Is because she is very much a virtuoso, and I'm very more so like, but she also appreciates like Nirvana and stuff, and she has that dichotomy within herself. And it's just like me, I'm over on like the post rock, Ed O'Brien, shoegaze, like My Bloody Valentine type deal. And that's why it works for us, because you have pretty much all of those spectrums. And anytime I've seen, which is not, I've seen very few comments about both of our playing together or like directing at Tia. but a lot of them is just like, I'm just like, do better. Like, if you can do
Yeah.
better, just do better.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, do you you're doing some writing? We're gonna get you in the Fretboard Journal, I promise. For 2024. Do you
Yes,
enjoy the writing as much as the video creation?
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. As far as writing goes, I was always a creative in that aspect. In high school in Florida, I got published in the Florida stage twice. And it was just like for some screenplays or stage or plays that I've written.
Hmm.
And for a while that area of creativity for me was just kind of dormant because I wasn't really invested into it. And then becoming more so a journalist now and writing, it reignited that joy. And it's quite frankly the most enjoyment I get outside of filming the videos in terms of the overall span of what I do in music. And for me, it's just like, what's a creative way? Like it has me sit down and organize my thoughts. And on top of that, I get to apply creativity because I'm like, okay, so what's a interesting way to word this to grab someone's attention? Or what's a way that people, being a millennial, like what's a reference I could make that other millennials will get?
Sure.
And like, it to me, it's I love it. Like I legit love writing and I love the process of it. And I just, for me, like even especially when I'm writing the scripts for the show, I'm just like, well, what kind of joke that I can slide in here? And for me, it's I tend to be it might not seem like it, but I tend to be a very inward and quiet person. So for me, it's just like getting all those thoughts out
Mhm.
and being able to speak my mind about a subject or, or whatever, and not have to worry about misconstruing my own words and not not saying things properly. Because like there's a bunch of the reviews that I'll watch of ours, and I'm like, oh man, I really wish I would have said this. I really wish I would have, formulated this thought better. But in a written format, it's just like, okay, I have everything I want to say, and then I can be as creative as I want with it.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that you're as jazzed about writing as some of this other stuff. And we're gonna stick you on an interview or two, I think, in 2024, which will
Oh
be a
yeah.
whole nother ball game.
Oh yeah, like no, I would definitely love to do more interviews. Like, um, I didn't realize it until there was one interview we did on working class music with one of my friends, Michael Bond, and he was in this other same genre. He was in he is in Woe Is Me in this other band called Issues, and we had the interview, and I think you commented not like on it, but like we talked about it,
Yeah.
and it was either you or someone who were like, "Yeah, you seem like a natural." I'm like, then I went back and looked at the interview, and I was like, "Yeah, I do seem very comfortable." Like, yeah, but it was it's one of those things where I'm very much like that's one of the things I want to do is
Yeah.
definitely interview more artists because I think personally I'm coming from a different perspective than others, and I don't think and that's might be putting myself on a pedestal, but I think there are other questions that they might not necessarily have talked about
Sure.
that I feel like I could ask them, and either I think they will more than likely be like, "Oh wow, no one's ever asked me that."
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for that. How are things otherwise? You seem to have gotten really fit in the last like 3 months.
Oh yeah. Yeah, fitness is tend to be my thing. It's funny because after this I'm going to the gym.
Okay.
Like I was telling my personal trainer yesterday, I was like, yeah, I tend to rubber band. And I was like, it just ties into my mental well-being because if I'm going through something bad, then it's like junk food, pizza, everything. But if I'm not, I tend to work out a lot, and more so for me, the fitness ties into my mental health.
Hmm.
So for me, it's just like a fit body is a fit mind.
Yeah.
And if I'm stressed or whatnot, I can take that all out in the gym. And it also goes into like, because there was, believe it or not, like, and there was a time where, yes, where I was just like, I would say I was, I want to say fat, but not like fat, like not like 500 pounds, but
Yeah.
uh, I realized how unhappy I was, and this was around that time that I said like, oh well, I needed a break,
Hmm.
uh, and I realized like with my life falling apart at the time, I realized I was like, man, I've got to do something about myself. Like, part of the reason I feel this way is because I'm not healthy. And so I started working out, started seeing a trainer, and then I realized the benefits of that, especially combined with a good diet.
Hmm.
Like it was just like, oh wow, like you mean I could feel great, along with getting great sleep and eat great and be the best version of me creatively as a friend, as a family member that I can be. And that really, really helped me because I know outside of the last few months before that, there was what I call the dark time, and it was rough. I had slid back into gaining a bunch of weight, and then it was just like, oh man, like because I had let a lot of things mentally fall into place that I should have handled better,
Hmm.
and I wasn't, and then it just all built up, and it was one of those moments of like I realized how unhappy I am, and then I realized I was like, okay, you got to get back. You can get back to this. And then, as superficial as it sounds, a part of me is like, wait, you're going to be at NAM. You're going to be on camera somewhere. It's like you got to make sure.
Yeah. The next clip goes viral.
Yeah, next
Got to look
clip
good.
that goes viral is like you were looking pretty good in the other one, but you got to look better.
That's so funny.
So
Has it
yeah,
all been diet and exercise? You got any other things in your quiver? Or
it's been diet and exercise, and
yeah.
honestly, as far as something that's helped me mentally is surrounding myself with people that genuinely care about me. The joke that I make with she's my best friend. She's my best friend in the world. The joke that I make with my best friend Naya is like she taught me what unconditional love was from outside of a family perspective.
Mm.
And I've seen glimpses of that within the people that I surround myself with. And that has helped me mentally and, held myself to account to a lot of my own shortcomings. And that ties into everything else. Is like as far as the music that I create, you know, I want it to be good. I want them to like it, because it's like since it's a sign of me, and it's like as far as the gear review and the written reviews and everything, it's like I want them to be proud of it, because it's a sign of me and not only my love for these things, but my love for them.
Yeah.
And it's nice having a really good support system because like I said, it just feeds into everything else. And it makes, in my opinion, it makes me better at what I do, and especially the writing, because like even then, like one of the best Young Mountain songs happened recently because of her, because she was literally like, hey, you should do this instead of this. And she's not musical at all. And I was like, you know what, you're right. But it's like, but if I didn't have that support system or have someone to share that idea with,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't happen. And then it's just like, I'll show some of my friends like the rough drafts of the articles I'm writing and the reviews I'm writing, and they would suggest something, and it's like, you know what, especially my friend Sheldon, him coming from a huge John Mayer fan, like, he'll tell me sometimes like, oh yeah, John Mayer played that. And I'm like, I know you're trying to get me to write a reference for John Mayer. I will, because it works. So, for me, I would say the support system is everything. And I think with a good support system and everything else falls into place, for me, it's fallen into place because it's inspired me to work out more, and it's inspired creativity. So yeah, that's really it. That's my life.
I love it. We covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
Well, Jason, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for your forthcoming contributions, TBD on what those are, but we'll make those happen. And I guess I will be one of the many people seeing the new slimmer version of you at NAMM. So
yes,
I'm excited for that.
Yes, it would probably be more muscular. Like my trainer's trying to get me to get like bulky, and I'm like, I want to be Bruce Lee. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see which way it goes.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right, Jason, thank you for having me.
All right, that was my conversation with Jason Mays. We have had so many cool people on this podcast lately. I am floored when I click on that podcast tab at fretboardjournal.com and see all the incredible people that we have been talking to. We're going to keep it going for 2024. Like I said, we're going to be mixing things up for a few weeks here, but please subscribe, please follow us, please share the podcast with your friends. And as always, you can send me feedback to all that we do at podcast@fretboardjournal.com.